Do you think President Putin is in strong control over everything that is happening in Russia, or do you think the competing factions maybe are...
Listen, there are two structures of the state, presidential republic and parliamentary republic. So Russia is presidential republic, where the head of the executive is president. So from this point of view, we should consider what's going on. Otherwise, you know, it is simplification to say that just one person can dictate and can control everything all over the world. That is not possible.
That's not possible, right. Who do you think ordered the killing of Alexander Litvinenko?
Listen, I have no idea about that. And as we know, after all these researches, all of these investigations, the final answer was not given officially, by the way. You know, so I don't know, and I doubt...
I think you can almost take that one as a lie detector test. We know who killed Alexander Litvinenko. It was Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Confidant. The British asked for them to be extradited. Instead, in fact, President Putin has given Mr. Lugovoy a medal for services to the motherland. How can we have a conversation, any dialogue? Your group is Dialogue of Civilizations. Yep. How can we have a dialogue when such a basic known fact, which was traced to the polonium trail left by Mr. Lugovoy all over London in the plane, how can we have the conversation if we can't get you to even address the most basic known issues?
Listen, first of all, both of us, we agree that until the court decision was delivered, there is no basic facts. That is only for the court to decide. But answering your question, I suppose from both sides, if we are talking about West and East, if we are talking Russia and Europe, if we are talking, you know, the big West and Russia, you know, I suppose this is a high time to try to calm down, to stop, and to think.
Sure. I think a lot of people would love to. It's just that they can't get over the very basic gap in communications.
Correct. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Well, let's go on to the Skripals. What do you think happened to the Skripals? Do you accept the British government state, or do you go with one Victoria said, you know, that they had bad fish or something like that? What do you think happened to the Skripals?
Listen, the short version, again, I suppose we should deal only with the facts. The phrase is that it seemed to be, or there is a lot of, you know, evidence. This is not for the serious people. You know, in this field, the field of secret services, intelligence, there is a special code of behavior. Those, you know, detained agents which were, you know, exchanged with the others, you know, never are the subject for further prosecution.
Well, you know what? If Russia didn't do it, if I was a country and was falsely accused of doing it, I think I would take that quite seriously and say, look, no, I didn't do it. I had developed Novichok, but I've never used it for political assassination. Instead, we've had a lot of sneering, sarcastic tweets and jokes from the Russian embassy. We've had items on Russian state television making jokes about traitors dying in odd circumstances in the UK.
Listen, you just mentioned dialogue. You know, even if we are talking the same language, whether Russian, for one part it is not native, for example, or English, for another part it is not native. But, you know, the mentality is different. And I am positive, you know, ambassador was not meaning to be sarcastic.
He wasn't, believe me. No, believe me. Totally means to be sarcastic. His English is fantastic. That the embassy tweet.
Listen, I don't want to discuss him. You ask my opinion. My opinion is that, you know, we should done better that in terms of, you know, explanations. But on the other side, it was not directed to humiliate anybody.
We haven't got time to go through all of these. So let's focus on Syria. And you heard the two gentlemen we had on earlier saying we need deterrence and there mustn't be escalation. What's your reaction to what you heard them saying in terms of Syria?
Listen, I'm very much concerned, to tell the truth, because what Ambassador said, we will strike, but, you know, we do not expect that the situation will deteriorate. That is something naive. It is not possible. And if we are talking about Cold War, I suppose now the world is standing on the border of real hot war. And
you think Putin, if he sees retaliation against Syria, will feel that as he needs to retaliate against the retaliation?
Again, you know, we are living in the world of information fakes. I'm not saying that is exactly everywhere, right. But you know, we are living in a strange world.
We are. We're living in a world where Russia says, "Oh, there hasn't been a chemical attack." By the way, they said there hadn't been a chemical attack last year. They voted again in the UN yesterday, vetoed the idea of an independent investigation. The independent investigation we had last year found there was a chemical attack. It was Assad, surprise,
many hours, but there was Iraq. Yes. And there was an assumption
and no
that
one is
Hussein possessed the military capabilities of the mass destruction. And point is, finally, there is nothing of the kind.
And no one is predicating the correctness of Western policy on this against the correctness of Western policy on that. The West, the UK, has had the most massive amount of investigation of the mistakes that were made in the run-up to the Iraq war. Has Russia said anything about last year's chemical attack in Syria, which independent investigations have now clearly found was Assad's air force?
If you ask for my opinion, if there is any proof of real attack, I will be the first to condemn this. Okay. I am condemning the attempt to assassinate people here, Skripal and his daughter, but I cannot buy everything which I'm reading and seeing now, just because, you know, it was said, listen, experts said that it was Russian to produce, it was Russian made. But finally, experts, British experts said, no way, we cannot detect it. It is not possible. Why politicians were using that to address the society? I mean, it is not correct.
No one is saying that all sides don't make some mistakes, and that isn't. The question is, can you have a sensible conversation with Russia about any of these issues when they're throwing so much disinformation and fakery out? Look, it's in a way. Our picture of Russia is one of a sort of thuggish capitalism, of a kleptocracy where people, an elite, are taking the resources for themselves. To what extent, and this is, your book misses out all sorts of interesting things. It has your great accounts of your time running the railroad, but you were part of that establishment. You're part of that problem, aren't you? Reuters report on the contracts for the railways. Under your watch, they were finding tens of contracts given to companies that were shell companies. No one knew who owned them. There were only two bidders for the contracts. They were both companies turned out to look like they were linked to each other. Money going into them. Reuters were finding transactions passing through a bank that was run by an old acquaintance of yours, who you said understands banking well, and no railway services were being delivered. This is just gross corruption, ripping off the Russian people, and this is why we are where we are.
Listen, firstly, by my status, yes, I was part of the establishment. You are correct. All other things, those assumptions are not correct, because never, ever, you know, any checking found out that the money was paid in Russian railways, but the services were not delivered. Never. It is false assumption. This is not true. This is not correct. As far as the system, as far as the way to do business, whether I like it or not, you know, if there is a company which, in accordance with the law, Russian law, is getting, you know, the contract, they should fulfill it. Never, at my memory, we signed a contract and the service was not delivered. Never.
Can I ask, do you think Russian taxpayers and railway users got value for money out of contracts you awarded, or under your watch, that were awarded to shell companies? No one knows, there's no public ownership, and they appear to be linked companies with only two bidders. 43 contracts between, between a whole bunch of years, actually. I mean, you know, you can read
forget about it. Listen, never it was the case when the monies, railway monies, were paid and the service was not delivered.
Okay. Well,
this
that's
is
a very
first.
narrow question.
Yeah.
But we know you're a very wealthy man with a house that's 70
listen,
hectares outside Moscow.
May I finish? Second, we were the company which was given all the rights and orders to construct Olympic Games infrastructure. We made it 2 years before the mandatory period. We made unbelievable. And my partners, my friends from Western Railways, they praised this work. That was the answer whether the taxpayers were getting the service or not for the monies we were paid.
We see you're a very wealthy man. Your son is a very wealthy man. He's got British citizenship. He lives here. Do you understand why there is such Western suspicion? When we look at the Skripals, the attitude to chemical weapon attacks in Syria, do you understand why the West has so many suspicions of Putin's Russia?
Listen, yes, because I'm professionally dealing with the aspects of relations between different civilizations. You know, I can answer your question. It will take a lot of time, but to make it short, listen, the suspicions between nations, between West and East, was not born yesterday. It was not born even 10 years ago. That is the historical precedent we are living through. But now I'm positive the world developed to such a scale that we should consider what will be the future for our kids. And that is a very good reason to stop, whether you like it or not, to stop, to think, and to deal with the objective facts.
That's a good note to end it. Vladimir, thank you very much indeed. Vladimir Yakunin in the book, The Treacherous Path.